Welcome back, folks. I know all is well. Today we're looking at the book of John chapter 6, and we're going to focus on the last two passages. So what I'll do, I'll read the last two passages first, and then I'll explain afterwards what stood out for me. Alright, so starting from verse 41. The heading of that passage is rejected by his own. Alright, so it says, the Jews then complained about him because he said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. Now in the passage before that, verse 35, Jesus said, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. So the Jews was complaining about that. Verse 42, and they said, is not this Jesus the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, I have come down from heaven? Jesus therefore answered and said to them, do not murmur among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God. Therefore, everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father, except he who is from God. He has seen the Father. Most assuredly I say to you, he who believes in me has everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I shall give is my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world. The Jews therefore quarreled among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Then Jesus said to them, most assuredly I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is food indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers ate the manna and are dead. He who eats this bread will live forever. These things he said in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. Okay, so that's the first passage. A second last passage actually. And the last passage, starting from verse 60. The heading of that passage is, many disciples turn away. Alright. Therefore, many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a hard saying, who can understand it? Then when Jesus knew in himself that his disciples complained about this, he said to them, does this offend you? What then if you should see the Son of Man ascend where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life, the flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit and they are life. But there are some of you who do not believe, for Jesus knew from the beginning who they were who did not believe and who would betray him. And he said, therefore I said to you that no one can come to me unless it has been granted to him by my Father. From that time many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. Then Jesus said to the 12, do you also want to go away? But Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus answered them, Did I not choose you, the 12, and one of you is a devil? He spoke of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, for it was he who would betray him, being one of the 12. So what I've noticed in these two passages is that there's two questions, and then Jesus gives the answer to those two questions. When we look at verse 52 again, it says, the Jews therefore quarreled among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? And verse 60, it says, therefore many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a hard saying, who can understand it? Now those are the two questions. And then verse 63, Jesus gives the answer. He says, it is the Spirit who gives life, the flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit, and they are life. All right. So they thought that Jesus was speaking to them in a literal form, but Jesus was actually speaking to them in spirit. So, and it's very important to understand that the spirit is more powerful than the flesh. When we look at the book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 14, it says, the spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? So when you are sick or when you are not feeling well, the flesh is in trouble, the body is weak and so forth. And God and the Spirit sustains you through that sickness. But it says, who can bear a broken spirit? So when your spirit is broken, it's important to focus on fixing the spirit first. Feed the spirit and focus on fixing the spirit first, because that is more powerful than the flesh. Also, when we look at Matthew 26, let's go to Matthew 26, almost there, Matthew 26, verse 40 and 41. All right, it says, then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, what? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. So once again, it just shows you that the spirit is more powerful, than the flesh. So it's important for us to know that we need to concentrate more on the spirit rather than the flesh. Because as Paul writes in the book of Galatians, he says, if we live in the spirit, let us also walk in the spirit. And so basically, I wanted to share this with you, John chapter 6, from verse 41 to verse 71, those two passages, and highlight the two questions and the answer that Jesus gives in the last passage, basically answering those two questions, that Jesus was speaking to them in spirit, and they thought Jesus was talking to them in a literal form. So I just wanted to share that with you, and just a reminder that the Lord gives us new strength every day. Thank you so much for joining me in my Bible study session. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay peaceful, and God bless you. I love you.